So good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Every year, the PTSA has hosted I Drive Smart to come and give a presentation about driver's ed. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, driver's ed used to be something that was offered in MCPS schools, and it is no longer offered that way, but it is required to get a driver's license as a teenager in Maryland. So we have found this really, really helpful. I have gone just as a parent and learned a lot myself as a parent. I have one driver and one driver in training, and it is one of the most challenging things to teach. And so we are really appreciative to have Officer Tom Pecoraro here tonight, who started I Drive Smart, who will go through lots of useful information and advice. We're also recording this. And I appreciate all of you coming out. I also want to give one shout out as well to I Drive Smart. We had a student in financial need, and the I Drive Smart partnered with BCC Cares to offer a free scholarship for the full driver's education program. And so we were really appreciative of that, and want to just say thank you for them for doing that. And that was great. So anyway, welcome. Thank you all for joining us. And I am going to turn it over, and I'm going to sit back and probably learn something else that I didn't know.
Great. Thanks, Lyric. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. And I guess I'm going to be looking, you'll see my head turning a little bit here. I'm working off of two screens. So if I do something wrong, if there's a problem, just let me know. Someone will just shout out to me. I'll share my screen here in just a moment. And then I promise I won't make you look at me the whole time. So my name is Tom Pecoraro. Started I Drive Smart back in 2004. I'm retired Montgomery County police officer. Started I Drive Smart back in 2004, retired in 2012. So tonight we're going to cover a program that we've been running since 2004. It's just a complimentary program that we got to all the schools in our operating area. We operate now in obviously in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. It's called the Smart 6 program. It is based what we know to be on the six causative factors that are always involved, either one or all six that are always involved when a teen is seriously killed or injured in a wreck. We know this to be true. We've done research with NHTSA. We've worked with the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, all the federal agencies, and it's been boiled down to there are six causative factors always involved, either one or all six. We're always involved when a teen is seriously injured or killed in a wreck. We're going to cover those tonight. Education a little bit about vehicles as well, design, and then we're going to give you some tools. This is just not an information dump. We're going to be able to share information with you that's going to help you mitigate those risks and really show you that driving is not a big black hole that we push our kids into. So I'm talking tonight, obviously, as a certified driver education instructor in a couple states, the owner of I Drive Smart, as a retired police officer, but also as a parent. My wife and I have 5 children. They're all older now. Our youngest is 21. They all drive. So been through it, just like many of you folks are going through it or will go through as far as trying to train your new driver and face the same challenges. Even though, I have all this experience in training, it was a chore training my own kids because look, it's a very passionate thing when you get into a car and you lose that control and you cede that control to your child or your guardian. And you have to be able to, rein in some of the natural tendencies to be white knuckled and scream. So it's not an easy process. So we're going to help you with some of that tonight as well. But I just want you to know that what you're feeling as a parent is the same thing that every parent or guardian feels when they're training a new driver. It's a challenging thing. And we know kids oftentimes will listen to everybody else, but their parent or guardian. So it's always a challenge. So what I'll do is I'm going to share my screen here and then I will hop right into the presentation. And I'm going to assume that everybody, I haven't heard anybody yell right now. I'm looking in the chat. I guess it's okay. Yep. Okay. Sounds like good. Everybody can see the screen, which is great. So again, speak right up if I'm missing something. So tonight, and I promise this won't be death by PowerPoint. Tonight, we're going to talk about some life-saving information. We're going to obviously share some risk numbers, but, and I promise I won't read all the slides to you. I'll touch on the high points and just kind of give you some valuable commentary, but we're really going to talk about these 6 causative factors and provide you tools that can help you train your new driver. So let's just talk about the numbers here. Two stats here that are really important. The first one, 22 teens are killed every day, and that number gets worse every year. But the telling number here is over half are involved in single vehicle wrecks, which we call them single vehicle collisions. The overwhelming majority that teens are killed in. And the other one is that driving is a leading cause of death, not just for teens from 16 to 29 years of age, which is really interesting. And obviously over half of all teen fatalities were killed by another teen driver. And we've seen the state of Maryland, like many state legislatures across the country, enact graduated driver licensing programs, which help to mitigate some of those risks. And one of them is having a passenger in the car. So we'll talk about that. But the most important thing you want to factor into your thinking here is that, again, there are risks there, but these risks can be mitigated as long as you know what those risks are. So just ask yourself these questions. What is your approach to driver education? Your children are, they're in one of the best schools, districts, counties in the country. How many kids get, we put a lot of effort into our kids, their education and their sports and their extracurriculars. But, how many kids, when we talk about like the SAT, the ACT, and all the effort and time that goes into training kids to do well on their college boards, how many kids die during their SAT, but we put all this effort into it, they die when the scores come home, right? So, you have to really think about how much time or thought is given to driver training. And then again, when you think about fatal wrecks, we always think about 75, 80, 90, 100 miles per hour, but it's important to understand that the same vehicle dynamic that will kill or injure somebody at 75 miles per hour is the same at 10 to 15 miles per hour. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we move through the presentation. What's your knowledge base of driver education? As far as, do you know that driving skills are perishable? They go away, they grow stale over time. New drivers, senior drivers, corporate drivers all face challenges. What's interesting is new drivers and senior drivers face many of the same challenges, and we'll talk about that, but driving skills are perishable. New drivers face a certain set of challenges. Corporate drivers, like, you have people that are driving on their spare time for DoorDash or Uber, corporate drivers for UPS or tractor trailers that come into the city. Everybody's facing within their own world certain challenges that other drivers might not face. It's important to understand that. And then, do you know that driver education involves an understanding of vehicles laws, obviously, but also about behaviors. And we talk about this a lot with our students in our program, is that obviously things outside the passenger compartment will harm you or kill you, but it's the behaviors inside the passenger compartment that really impact the safe operation of that vehicle. We'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation, but behaviors are a big deal. And when you think about behaviors and the graduated licensing program, it is targeted on trying to mitigate those risks that are involved driver behavior or passenger behavior inside the vehicle. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about cars right now. What you're looking at is the safest type of wreck to be involved in. If you had to pick of any type of collision to be involved in, this is the safest type of wreck to be involved in, a front impact collision. Vehicles are primarily designed for front impact collisions. They absolutely are. Car manufacturers design vehicles as inexpensive as possible, and they design them for front impact collisions. These are the least frequent type of collisions we have on our roadways, and they're the least frequently fatal types of collisions that we have on our roadway. Yet, car manufacturers design vehicles for this type of collision. So again, you're looking at the safest type of wreck to be involved in. Vehicles are not designed, they're not designed for side impact collisions. Yet, these are the most frequent type of collisions we have on our roadway. They're the most frequently fatal type of collisions we have on our roadway. And these are the most frequently type of fatal collisions for teen drivers. What you're looking at is a fatal collision that occurred at 35 miles per hour that was side impact. So just remember that. Safest type of wreck to be involved in. Car manufacturers design vehicles, but these are the least frequently type of fatal collisions. They're the least frequent type of collisions we have on our roadways. These are the most frequent type of collisions, the most frequently fatal types of collisions we have on our roadway. Yet car manufacturers are not designed, cars are not designed for these types of vehicles. I'm sorry, everybody can see this, right? Okay. Okay, so then why are side impact collisions, okay, so lethal? Real simple. What is outside the vehicle ends up inside the vehicle. Real simple. What is outside the vehicle ends up inside the vehicle. This is a fatal collision that happened at Georgia and Arcola, I believe, a number of years ago. What we call this telephone pole is what we call the mechanism of injury. So again, what is outside the vehicle ends up inside the vehicle on these side impact collisions. So let's talk about mechanisms of injury. What you're looking at is a steering wheel, obviously, that was bent by the driver. This vehicle is designed with airbags. As you can see, there's the airbag notation on the center post or center column of the steering wheel. The driver impacted into the steering wheel. The steering wheel is what we call the mechanism of injury, create an injury severe enough in order to take the life of the driver. The driver did not have their seatbelt on. A lot of people don't know that oftentimes in high-speed violent collisions, airbags don't deploy. We'll talk a little bit about airbags in the next few slides. But again, a mechanism of injury inside a passenger compartment can be the steering wheel. Mechanism of injury can be an unbelted passenger, the Starbucks cup, a cell phone, a heavy book bag, anything that is not stowed away inside the passenger compartment begins to fly around in a violent collision and become what we call a mechanism of injury. Why do vehicles end up off the roadway? So let's talk about this. These are the primary types of collisions that new drivers are involved in, where vehicles leave the roadway. They leave the roadway for two reasons. Fatal control speed, obviously, fatal control distance. The vehicle ended up off the roadway, but what is that fatal control speed and fatal control your distance? Essentially what happens is the driver overdrives the roadway or overdrives the car or both. Think of it this way. Race car drivers are trained to go fast. They are in vehicles designed to go fast. They are in environments designed to drive fast in, and they're driving with other individuals in vehicles designed to go fast, and they are trained to drive those vehicles fast, and they still wreck. Many of the roadways that we are driving on today in Montgomery County and in the DMV, these are roads that were left over from the Civil War. These were horse paths that were the shortest distance between 2 points, designed for a carriage or a rider or a walker. Many of these roads, River Road, some parts of River Road, Falls Road, some parts of Seven Locks. You can think of probably many in your own neighborhood. They're just not designed for a 35, 55, 6,500 pound vehicle going 35 to 45 miles per hour. So it's important to understand that we have many roadways that are very easy to overdrive. So when you overdrive the roadway, your vehicle ends up off the roadway, and that results in a side impact collision like this. When vehicles end up off the roadway, that is a side impact collision. This driver overdrove the roadway and overdrove the vehicle and ended up off the roadway into a fixed object. Real simple. Now let's talk about airbags. Airbags are your friends. Okay. They're a fantastic tool. Airbags are what we call, and you'll even see it on your dashboard or your steering column or the post up over your head. You'll see the symbol used to say airbag, still does occasionally, but you'll see SRS, which stands for a supplemental restraint system. Airbags are designed to be used with seatbelts. Seatbelts keep you inside the vehicle. Airbags reduce trauma. Seatbelts keep you inside the vehicle. Airbags reduce trauma. Now, airbags reduce trauma only because they can deploy so quickly. So what happens when an airbag deploys? Vehicle gets into a collision, the airbag system is triggered. Once it's triggered, a small explosion occurs behind the dashboard, the steering wheel column, or up over your head on the center post. And in milliseconds, that explosion allows for the airbag cavity to inflate in milliseconds in order to catch the moving or the movement of the occupants inside the vehicle, while the seatbelt is keeping them in place while the body flails around. It reduces the trauma. Airbags are not designed to be used by themselves. Again, seatbelts keep you inside the vehicle. Airbags reduce trauma. Now, airbags, as a result of this explosion that occurs simultaneously with all of the ones in the car, they deploy at 200 miles per hour. Someone who is 12 years or younger does not have the skeletal structure rigid enough in order to withstand the impact of an airbag that's traveling at 200 miles per hour. So rule of thumb is this: 12 years and younger should be in the back seat, center seat with a lap belt and harness on. 12 years and younger. Passengers older than 12 should be in, obviously, the front seat, lap belt, harness, seat pushed all the way back. The driver should be 10 inches or more away from the steering wheel column, lap belt, harness as well. If you impact into an airbag without your seatbelt, oftentimes more damage is done. So again, airbags are a supplemental restraint system. Airbags are designed to work with seatbelts. Seatbelts keep you inside the vehicle. Airbags reduce trauma. So airbags are our friends under the right circumstances. So this is just an example of failing to control speed. Thank goodness that the horse wasn't hurt, but this is a vehicle. Driver failed to control speed, ran into the back of the horse trailer. So let's talk about those low speed and vehicle dynamics we talked about in the previous slide. So here you have a low speed collision, excuse me, which is a classic new driver mishap, pedal misapplications. New drivers and senior drivers both have this problem where they misapply the pedals, but they have this problem for two very different reasons. So this is a driver that was in a third level parking garage, stepped on what they thought was the vehicle when it was in drive, but it was in reverse, and stepped on the accelerator and went out the side of the parking garage. And fortunately was able to catch on, the front wheels caught onto the front bumper and stopped it from plunging 3 levels down. This is pedal misapplication. Now, new drivers, we all know our new drivers are, going to do everything they can do in order to not give off any implication that they're nervous behind the wheel. New drivers historically will internalize a lot of the stress or the nerves because they just want to drive. And if their supervising driver is picking up any kind of problem, they are going to say, okay, hold on, let me take over. Because look, new drivers want to drive. So they're going to internalize. But new drivers typically, for the first 6 months, have a big challenge when it comes to managing all of the stimuli inside the passenger compartment, the instrumentation of the vehicle, the movement of the vehicle, the shifting of the gears, the steering, and the pedals. New drivers historically will misapply pedals very often. Senior drivers do the same thing because senior drivers, they can get disoriented as well because their cognitive abilities decline over time. Everybody's does. I'm going to be 57 in a couple of days. And I know you find that hard to believe because I look so young, but I'm going to be 57 in a couple of days. And I can tell you when I'm crossing 6 lanes of traffic and I've got the radio on, I'll turn the radio down because I want full-time attention. Years ago, not a problem. But as you age, your vision, I have a hard time seeing at night just because I wear glasses. Your cognitive ability slips a bit as you age. And same with seniors, they have reduced cognitive ability. They also have reduced sensitivity below the waist. So lots of times you're going to have grandma, grandpa speeding across Giants parking lot because they are convinced they're on the brake, but they are on the accelerator. And they've got those thick Pro Walker shoes like my dad used to wear before he passed away. He was 86 when he passed away, and he was still driving a couple months before he passed away. And there's lots of times Pop-Up was, misapplying the pedal. My mom was like, man, your father, thought he was on the brake, was on the gas, or vice versa. So those things happen. So pedal misapplication is one of those vehicle dynamics that we talk about. Hey, you can get killed at 10 to 15 miles per hour. You got to be doing 75, 80, 90 miles per hour. So it's all about the fundamentals, understanding, focusing, and practicing the fundamentals. Okay, I show this slide because alcohol and drugs is one of the causative factors that we'll talk about, but 100% of every wreck involving alcohol and drugs is preventable. 100%, every one of them. So it's just something to talk about with your team and say, hey, alcohol and drugs, you want to live, but we know what the causative factor is when you're drinking or drugging behind the wheel or when somebody else is. So these wrecks are 100% preventable. All right. So as we move through the remaining parts of the presentation, I want you to just use this as a visual. It's what we call the safe driving triangle. And we all know you got a good, strong triangle when all three sides of the triangle are leaning on each other. And then when you pull out one side of the triangle collapses. So this is what we call the safe driving triangle. When there's good decisions, reduced opportunities of risk, and solid driver ability. When you have good decision-making, reduced opportunities of risk, and good driver ability, sound fundamental ability, that makes a safe driving triangle. So let's talk about that. So just vision this through keep this as a mental note as we move through the rest of this presentation. So let's talk about the first leg of the safe driving triangle, which is opportunities of risk. This is when your teen driver is at greatest risk. Okay. This is something you really need to focus on and understand that your riskometer should be off the charts when your new driver is out there driving. So overwhelmingly, new drivers are seriously injured or killed in a wreck the first 6 months they are licensed. Overwhelming. The first 6 months that a new driver is driving, they are involved in serious collisions or killed. And we'll talk a little bit more about the reasons why, but that is an opportunity of risk. On the road after 9 o'clock at night. So I did 25 years as a police officer. I worked rotating shifts for 25, but my last 7, I worked straight midnights. And I can tell you nothing good happens on the road after 9 o'clock at night. So why is after 9 o'clock at night, why are teens predominantly injured, killed in wrecks after 9 o'clock at night? Overwhelmingly, the numbers will show that it's after 9 o'clock at night. Why is that? 3 main reasons. Lower traffic density means higher average speeds. Lower traffic density, higher average speeds. People just drive faster after 9 o'clock at night because there's less traffic density. We've seen it during COVID. COVID traffic density way down. Insurance companies were giving refunds to folks because people weren't driving, and they would send a check. Hey, your car's sitting at home. We're not going to charge you because they knew people weren't out there driving. So fatalities have spiked for a period of time because lower traffic density, people are driving faster, more people are injured and killed in wrecks. Same thing with teens after 9 o'clock at night, driving faster because of low traffic density. That's first. Second reason is reduced visual acuity. It's harder to see at night. New drivers have a hard enough time managing their space and the movement of the vehicle during daylight hours. That is compounded when they're driving the vehicle at nighttime, when it gets dark. It's much more difficult to see. It's much more difficult to sense at night. Some people don't have great vision at night. I'm one of them. So it's important to understand after 9 o'clock at night, your teen's out there driving, your riskometer should be going up. And the third reason is uncontrolled intersections, flashing yellows, flashing reds. It still confuses people. Even seasoned drivers are like, okay, what is it? Flashing yellow. I stop, or I slow down, or I speed up, or flashing red. Do I stop? I'm not, it gets confusing because, people, aren't always, familiar with those types of traffic controls late at night. So reduced visual acuity, uncontrolled intersections, lower traffic density means higher average speeds after 9 o'clock at night. Another risk, when another teen is a passenger, when another teen is the driver. And then this is one at the bottom that people don't know, that we really hit home. And I'll tell you a little story. When left in the care of a non-adult or elderly family member. So let me just share with you a personal story of why it kind of hit this home. So I can tell you overwhelmingly the death notifications I made for teens in wrecks in my 25 years as a police officer was late at night. And I was making that notification to an elderly family member or that cool older brother or sister that was home from college. And this is how it goes. So my nephew was killed a number of years ago in a wreck down in Virginia. And he was, 17 at the time, springtime of his senior year, getting ready to go off to college, like all the other kids are at that time of the year, kind of checked out, getting ready to graduate, excited to kind of, do their own thing eventually. So he was killed in a wreck down in Virginia. So he's one of 4 children, and my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, left their 2 older children, Thomas and Mary, in the care of my elderly parents at the time, who were 80 and 85 years old. And my sister and her husband took their 2 younger children and left on a short trip for a few days, leaving the older 2 in the care of my elderly parents. So, they were told, hey, you go home right after practice to Nonny Pop-Up's house. You're spending the night there. It's a school night. You make sure you get your homework done. You get up, go to school in the morning. So Mary comes right home, but what does a 17-year-old senior springtime in April do after lacrosse practice? Gets on the phone and calls my 85-year-old father and says, hey, Pop-Up, I just want to stop at my friend's house on the way home from practice. Everybody's going over, not going to see these guys. We're just going to stop. No big deal. Only be for an hour. No, Thomas, your mother told me that you were supposed to come home right after practice. You're supposed to get your homework done. You got to go to the school morning. You come right home. Oh, Pop-Up, I just want to go. 3 or 4, 5, 6 phone calls later, my father's still digging his heels in. No. You're supposed to come home. 6 phone call. I tell you what, you talk to your grandmother. So my father hands the phone to my mother. No, Thomas, your mother said you're supposed to come home right after practice. You're already 20 minutes late. You're supposed to be here. You come home right now. So hang up. 2 or 3, 4, 5 phone calls later to my 80-year-old mother. Fine. You know what? You call your mother. So Thomas gets on the phone, calls my sister, who's 5 hours away, trying to parent on the cell phone. Hey, I just want to go to, whoever's house. It's right after practice, no, you should go home. Oh, you're so uncool. All the other kids, they can go, the parents let them go. This stinks, whatever. 2, 3 phone calls. Finally, it's tell you what, okay, you can go for an hour and then you go right to Nonny Pop-Up's house. Well, 30 minutes later, Thomas was dead on a roadway down in Virginia. Thomas has rolled his car over. He had no shirt, no shoes, was in a pair of shorts, had no cell phone, and no ID. Thomas was playing the game that kids still play today, where they're at a house, they take a shot of alcohol, they hop in the car, and they try to see who can drive the prearranged route the fastest. Thomas rolled his car over. Here's the point that with this is that overwhelmingly teens that are killed are left in the care of a non-adult or elderly family member. Why is that such a big deal? Because a parent or guardian is going to push back harder. They're going to intervene. They're going to be engaged more. and the elderly family member or the cool brother or older sister from college, they're just not going to. So the two questions I was always asked when you make these death notifications is two questions overwhelmingly. Is they were where, they were with who. So this is when your teen is at greatest risk. First 6 months they're licensed, on the road after 9 o'clock at night, when another teen is a passenger, when another teen is a driver, and when they're left in the care of a non-adult or elderly family member. Okay. So let's talk about the next leg, which is the abilities of the driver. Okay. Right in the middle of the slide here, this is something that we really have to hit home. We all have to understand. When the state issues the license to your new driver on the day that they pass their driver's test, it means they have met the minimum proficiency as a driver. It does not mean that they were a proficient driver. The driving test in the state of Maryland measures minimum proficiency. They can start the car. They can stop the car. They can turn the car off. They have a basic understanding of the rules of the road. They don't even have to parallel park anymore. They have to back into a parking stall, which is oversized. And they have to have, good mirror usage, blinker usage. The point that we're making here is once they get that license the first day, in your mind, you need to understand that they've met the minimum proficiency. That's when the learning really starts. It takes 1,000 hours to become a proficient driver. Nobody drives more than cops. We drive to work. We drive while we're at work. We drive home. And then we drive 10 hours at work. We drive home. And then we drive on the weekends just like everybody else. And they drag us in every year for 2 or 3 days of driver training because we develop bad habits, just like everybody does. So again, it takes 1,000 hours to become a proficient driver. And the other thing that you have to consider is the driving environment, the weather, the road type, the traffic density, and the duration. So we get a lot of kids that come into our program and they've driven a lot with their supervising driver. And like, hey, I'm a good driver. We're like, yeah, you are. For 16 and 3 months, sure, but it takes a lot of time. So when you think about those things, you have to consider the student, minimum proficiency, and then the environment. So let me just share something else with you. So our youngest daughter goes to Xavier out in Ohio. And before COVID, I was getting ready. She was starting her junior year and was driving her out there to go back to school. And we decided, hey, okay, you need a car, you can have a job, internships, all that good stuff. So we hop in the car and to drive from Maryland out to Cincinnati. It's about 8 hours, and it's out through the mountains a bit, and it's a long drive. So I drove 5 hours. So the plan was drive you out in your car and then I'll fly back. It's a short trip in an airplane. So we'll drive out there and drop your car. So it was an 8-hour trip, and I drove 5 and she drove 3. And we get there and we move her into her house and she is gassed. She's completely exhausted. She's like, wow. She goes, that's really tough driving that long. And I'm like, yeah, driving is a stressful thing. So this is what you have to think about your new driver. There's a lot of internal stress with new drivers. It's a lot of internal stress that they're going to mask and they're not going to let you know. They're not going to tell you that they're scared most of the time. They're not going to tell you that, they didn't do well, in their driving session with their instructor, whatever. They want to drive. So the important thing to understand is that the tension behind the wheel, the self-induced stress, the little bit of the anxiety that new drivers have, it wears on them. So new drivers, even though, if you're 23, 24, 40, 55, 60, whatever, you've been driving, you can handle that because you understand and you're calm about certain things. New drivers don't have any of that experience to calm themselves down. Everything is a first for them for a period of time behind the wheel. And with that comes new stress and new anxiety. So it's really important. It's really important to understand that weather, road type, density, and duration have an impact on your new driver. And let's just talk about road type and speed limits. Speed limits around here are designed for perfect traffic density, perfect road character, and perfect weather conditions. How often do we have that when things are back to normal? Never. Try to do the speed limit on Georgia Avenue or Wisconsin Avenue or Rockville Pike. I mean, people will blow your doors off. So, it's a lot to consider, and there's a lot of things coming at your new driver that they're not even aware of. Okay, almost done here. Final leg, driver decisions. So the reason why we show this slide is if you look on the left side of your screen, in a nutshell, these are the 6 causative factors that are always involved. One or all 6 are always involved when a teen is killed or seriously injured in a wreck. Speed, that's a driver decision. Alcohol and drugs, that's a driver decision. Passenger number, that's a driver decision and an opportunity of risk that the supervising driver, parent, or guardian needs to manage. Time of day, after 9 o'clock at night, again, that's a driver decision. That's a driver decision and an opportunity of risk that has to be managed by the supervising driver. Inexperience, again, that comes to driver ability. And then down here at the bottom, seatbelts, that's your driver decision. And let's talk a little bit more about seatbelts. So I was a Montgomery County kid. I grew up in Montgomery County. I'm one of 8 kids. I have 5 older brothers. They would bring their cars home, and the first thing we would do is we'd cut the seatbelts out because seatbelts weren't cool back then. It's a cultural thing. But over time, seatbelts became a big deal. And a lot of the ad campaigns run by the government, a lot of the research done by the insurance companies was showing that, hey, man, seatbelts are important. So again, culturally, all the little kids in the car would be like, hey, put your seatbelt on, and everybody has a seatbelt on. We're being good citizens. What we find now, still today, 60% of new drivers don't wear their seatbelt. 60% of new drivers, 6 in 10, do not wear their seatbelt. Only 40% do. I caught my own kids as new drivers not wearing their seatbelt. It's like, hey, come on, they'll pull into the driveway and the lap belt will be on, but the harness will be behind their arm, whatever. But the important thing to understand is that seatbelts really need to be driven home for our new drivers. So I was a cop for 25 years. I got 2 brothers who are cops. My mom was in the agency in school safety for 30 years. I have a nephew who's a police officer. I had cops at my dinner table as a kid with my older brothers, bringing home police to eat with us on their breaks. I mean, I've been around cops my whole life. 150 cops that work for the company. I can tell you, I've asked many of them over the years this one question. It's like, have you ever unbuckled a dead person in a wreck? Have you ever unbuckled a dead person in a wreck? And I can tell you, not one time has anybody that I've asked that question to said yes. They had to think like, okay, you know what? I really can't remember. Man, they were hurt. They were hurt bad or whatever, but I really can't remember it. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen. Obviously, it can happen. But if you don't remember anything from this presentation tonight, the one thing that you can do and your new driver can do to dramatically reduce being seriously injured or killed in a wreck is just wearing a seatbelt. Wearing it properly. Even if your car has airbags, you don't wear your seatbelt, it's bad. Wearing your seatbelt is the one thing that can really dramatically reduce your risks of being seriously injured or killed in a wreck. And then you look at these causative factors, these 6 causative factors on the left-hand side of your screen. Driving is not a big black hole that we just push our kids into. It's a life skill. Kids need to drive. We have a lot more kids coming to our program earlier now than before. It used to be where, students were delaying their time of getting their license. One of my sons was 19 before he got his drive. He was at the Naval Academy, just didn't have time. He was 19. I was like, man, you're going to be driving a ship before you'll be driving a car. And finally at 19, almost 20, he got his driver's license. But the issue here is that now because of COVID, a lot of parents and guardians don't want to put their kids in public transportation or on the school bus, or they want to have control of their driving is a life skill. It's a life skill. And if you're licensed today, you're probably going to end up driving, 50 years, 50 people are living longer and driving longer and healthier. So it's a lifelong skill. So you need to understand that it's a lifelong skill And the major risks to a new driver are things that can be mitigated now that you know them. So let's just talk very quickly about mitigating some of those risks. So obviously we have a graduated licensing program in our state. And we encourage our parents and teens and our students, hey, let's have a graduated responsibility scale. So here it is, your license today, your parent or guardian, your license today. Okay, great, got your license. Congratulations. So here are the 5 places you can drive for the first 5 weeks that you have your license. And when you can demonstrate proficiency to and from those 5 destinations, we'll add 1 more each week after that. So you can drive to school. School's going back in. You can drive to work. You can drive to practice. You can drive to your best friend's house. And you can drive to the store for me when I need you to run an errand. So those are the 5 locations you can drive to for the first 5 weeks. And let's get in the car and I'm going to show you the safest way to get to each location and back. And then we're going to make a deal that you're going to drive to those 5 locations the way that I show you for the first 5 weeks. And hey, the reward's going to be 1 more the week after that, 1 more. And then your traveling radius will expand over time. The mistake is made that we just give a student their license and then they cut them loose and cross your fingers and kind of hope everything's okay. You got to manage that freedom. I mean, hey, when I was sick, I was at the MVA on my birthday in my mom and dad's 1979 Chevy Laguna station wagon. And thank goodness that station wagon cannot talk because that was my car through most of high school. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's your rolling apartment, for some kids. So you really have to control the traveling radius and destinations for a period of time because it's the maximum level of freedom for them. So you limit that traveling radius and destination. So it's Friday night. You want to go to the game at BCC. Okay, you want to go to the game at BCC and they're going to drive up to Chipotle and then you're going to drive to your best friend's house and then you're going to drive home, right? Those are the 4 locations we're going to BCC, to Chipotle, to your best friend's house and then home, right? Okay, let's go over to Google Maps. All right, let me see. From home to school, it's 3 miles. From school to Chipotle, it's 3 miles. From Chipotle to your best friend, it's 3 miles. And from your best friend's house home, it's 3 miles. So that's 12 miles. All right, let's go out and take a look at the car, the odometer. Okay, great. So we know what the odometer reading is. If you come back and there's like 50 miles or 20 miles off the odometer, we've got a problem. It's just an old trick that shift sergeants would use with their rookies to make sure they were in their beat where they're supposed to be when they say they're supposed to be there. It's the same way just to control with a little bit of freedom, you're a new driver when they're going to be out driving to those locations. So it's a good way to manage and it doesn't cost you a penny. The other issue is you want to add in point-to-point contact. Okay, fine. Call me when you get to the game. Great. Hey, mom, dad, I'm at the game. Yep, going in right now. Game's over. We won. We're pumped. Yep, we're going to the Chipotle. Yep. Okay, I'll call you. Call me when you get to Chipotle. All right, take the way that I showed you. Nobody else in the car. Call me when you get there. Okay, great. You're at Chipotle. Hey, just send me a quick selfie. Everybody loves a selfie. Come on. I just want to make sure you're there. Just hold up 2 fingers and make sure everything's good to go. Okay, great. So what that does is that point-to-point contact, it creates a little bit of a delay. It allows you the ability to kind of get in the head of your new driver. Say, hey, man, keep an eye on you. You got 12 to 13 miles, make sure everything's good to go. Nobody else in your car. I love you. Take it easy, and it slows down, especially young male drivers. They're the highest risk category, tend to be very impetuous, kind of slow them down, make them think about what they're doing. And then obviously you want to get in the car with the new driver for a year, in and out, checking on them, making sure that, hey, everything's good to go because we all develop bad habits. And then I won't read all these other things to you, but 2 things I want to point to you here on this slide is something we call constructive possession. So like, what's constructive possession? So it's important to let your teen know that the passenger compartment, when they're in control of it, or they're hopping into the passenger compartment with somebody else who's in control of it, it's a very different world now. It's something we call constructive possession. So, it's a Friday night, carload of teens, gets pulled over for whatever reason. The officer was walking up to the car and all the windows are going up and then knock on the window, license registration, please. And they roll the window down that much. And then, they slide their license registration out, and the officer can smell everything that's going on inside that passenger compartment. So it's like everybody out, and they see the, 6-pack of Budweiser tall boys. And you're like, okay, who does this belong to? And it's like, everyone's like, it's not mine. Call constructive possession. It belongs to everybody. And look, our kids are good. And we've seen it happen a lot of times where they have no idea. They're driving the car. They're just giving their friends, third cousin, a ride, and they've got something with them and they have no idea. So it's important that your students understand that, hey, passenger compartment, you're going to a great high school. You're creating a future for yourself. You're working hard, taking the SAT, ACT, and all that good stuff. You're getting going on to a great life in college if you're going to do that, or vacation or whatever. Don't mess it up with something like this, and don't mess it up by just not thinking about it. Understand what the law is, constructive possession. And the other thing at the bottom of the screen here is we have to understand that 1 in 10 drivers are impaired on a roadway at any time. 1 in 10, which means they are under the influence of some illegal narcotic, some legal narcotic, or they're sleep deprived. And that impairment is 24/7, 1 in 10. The other number here is 1 in 20 drivers on the roadways. 1 in 20 at any time are unlicensed, which means they're probably uninsured. So you want to talk to your agent. And full disclosure, I don't sell insurance. I'm not telling you to go to a certain insurance company, whatever. I'm just telling you what I do. And it's a recommendation we make to everybody. Call your agent and talk to them about what we call underinsured, uninsured motorist coverage, which means you're driving down the road, not your fault. Someone impacts into you, not your fault at all. You're injured, your car is wrecked. And this at-fault driver either has the state minimums of $30,000 per wreck, $30,000 per person, $60,000 per wreck, or they have no insurance. If you have somebody that is with the state minimums, you'll exhaust that quickly. What underinsured, uninsured motorist coverage allows you to, once you exhaust the claim amounts on the other person's policy, you can turn to your own policy and claim up to $1 million. So it just covers you if you run into a situation like that. It's a rider you can add. It's like an additional $16 a month. I have it, especially you want to have it if you have a teen driver out there. Just call your agent. They'll know exactly what it is. It's money well spent. And then obviously new drivers, and let me just jump down here. People ask us why I put SUV type vehicles. We're not saying avoid them. Just new drivers have to understand that, hey, if you've learned on a vehicle that's like 3,500 pounds, if you hop into an SUV, some are 6,000 to 6,500 pounds, a lot more stopping power. The chassis is going to sway a little bit more. It's obviously a bigger vehicle. Your sight lines are going to be different. It's just going to handle differently. So it's kind of like learning to drive all over again in a new vehicle. And the other thing that we suggest is we had no rule in our house with our 5 kids. There's a no parking the car in the garage rule if you have a garage now, because I wanted my car to stay in the garage and not end up in my living room. New drivers notoriously misapply pedals. So residential garages should be one of those high risk maneuvers that you understand that, okay, let's take it easy. It's parking in the driveway. Mom or dad or supervising parent or guardian, we'll pull it in for you later. We kind of did that. So just something you need to consider. And then what's the MBA saying about driver education? It's designed to teach fundamental minimal skills. Parent and guardians, they got to play a big role with regard to driver training. Young drivers may qualify, but they're still learning to drive. And again, we say minimum proficiency. That's when the real learning starts. But again, in Maryland, speed limits fluctuate. They're changing all the time. They just changed a bunch of speed limits in Montgomery County. Traffic gets heavy. It's going to start getting heavier again. You can see that with people out and about. And then obviously, a lot of people from all over the world come and live here for a short period of time. When we get a dusting of snow, all those people that just will abandon their car in the middle of the roadway. So a lot of hazards out there. And then again, at the end here, we talk about multitasking. Just like you, my kids, it's the multitasking generation. They're just used to doing a lot of things at one time. But the problem is that driving is the ultimate in multitasking, so, we've all seen it. Our kids are at home, they're watching TV and they're texting on their phone and they're working on their laptop and they're listening to their conversation and they're doing 3 things and 4 things pretty good at one time. Driving is not one of them. So again, you got to have a healthy fear, which is a good fear, which is assuming the worst of other drivers. Understand that, hey, driving is the ultimate in multitasking on its own. And then you should be refreshing your skills over time. Reading about driving, taking a driver improvement course, because hey, driving absolutely is a lifelong skill and you're going to need it depending upon where you live. Okay. Just one more thing that I want to just talk about here quickly, and I'll stop sharing my screen if I can. I think I've successfully stopped sharing. Okay, yeah. A lot of people ask us, they're like, well, what about cell phones and those types of things? Well, let's just talk about that briefly. So, growing up in Montgomery County, it was driving distraction was the 8-track cassette player. And then it was the cassette player. Then it was the CD player. Then it's the cell phone. This is what we have to say about that. So when you think about distractions, we just talk about them as distractions. Driving is 90% visual. It's 5% touch and 5% hearing. Driving is 90% visual, 5% touch, 5% hearing. Every time you take your eyes off the roadway, you reduce your ability to control that car by 90%. Deaf people can drive. They do every day and they do a great job. Blind people cannot. So every time you take your eyes off the roadway, whether it's the cell phone, whether it's the hot coffee that you might have spilled on yourself, or talking to a passenger, or putting on your makeup, or even eating, every time you take your eyes off the roadway, you reduce your ability to control that car by 90%. So when we talk about cell phones, we say, hey, look, it's just the flavor of the month. Eventually, it's going to be something else. Car manufacturers, and the other point I'd like to make is car manufacturers are not doing us any favors. We got these beautiful nav systems and a lot of things to look at. Also, our vehicles are like super comfortable. Driving is a very active process. So I have a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, and he's like, we were talking about it, and he's like, when we have people with certain fears and phobias, one of the ways that we help them overcome those fears or phobias is that we'll put them in a very comfortable room. We'll dim the lights. They'll be sitting on a couch or something very comfortable in a very safe, quiet, dimly lit room. And we'll portray those images either in a video or a picture, and then we'll start to desensitize them to that thing or things that they are fearful of. The same thing happens when we're in our vehicles. Car manufacturers are desensitizing drivers every day. We are sitting in vehicles that are as comfortable as our living room. They've got great sound systems. They've got beautiful color nav systems to look at, and it reduces driving to a non-active process. So my point here is that you have to be engaged. And one of the ways to be engaged, and I get asked this all the time, hey, what's the best type of car to get for my new driver? I can tell you one feature. A manual transmission vehicle is great for new drivers. And it's a skill that a lot of people don't have. To be able to drive a manual trans, to work the clutch, to listen to the engine for the RPMs, to be engaged with the shifting, to understand all that, it keeps you actively engaged. All my boys have manual transmission vehicles. My girls don't like them so much, but they are learning how to drive them. My wife can drive a stick. So driving a stick is awesome. When I was a kid growing up, I learned how to drive 300 tree. I mean, I'm an old guy, 300 tree on a pickup truck. So again, when we talk about cell phones, yeah, cell phones are a distraction. It's just one of many distractions, but driving is active and you have to be actively engaged. So that's all I got right now. I don't know if people have questions. I know there was one question that someone asked her, like, hey, do you teach this in your driver training program? Some of this material is covered, but this is primarily for the Smart 6 presentation because we have to use the curriculum that the state approves. but we do cover a little bit, but most of this is for the parent team that we do right here tonight.
Tom,
Yes.
how can you go over a little bit about how driver's ed works, like what the setup is for kids, and then also what parents should consider when they're evaluating a driver's ed program?
Sure. Okay. So great question. So driver ed used to be, I took it in my high school when I was a kid growing up, but it's been privatized over the year and is being privatized throughout the country. You're seeing that in Virginia. We operate in Virginia. DC doesn't have a driver education requirement. So sometimes we have folks that ask that. So here's what it is. So driver education in the state of Maryland, you have to take driver ed in order to get a license. Even if you're an adult, you have to take driver ed. There are some reduced restrictions for driving time, but essentially you have to take 30 hours in class and 6 hours behind the wheel with a certified driver education program. Okay. Now, the driver education schools are regulated by the Maryland Department of Motor Vehicles. There's a whole section called the Driver Instructional Services Division. They regulate, monitor, and police the driver education companies. Here's the simplest thing you can do. If you want to check out a company, every driver education company is audited on about a 6-month cycle. So they'll come down and there are certain documentation that they have to maintain for each student, but also driver education companies have to carry workers' comp. They got to carry all the licensing and insurance requirements, which can be found on the site. If you go to the MVA site and under driver training, you can see a whole list of schools, and then you can contact the Driver Instructional Services Division and ask them, hey, I want to get the information related to infractions on driver education schools in my area. And they'll be able to give you a list of schools. You can search them by county, and then you'll be able to see, hey, how did this school do with their driver training? The other issue is that driver education programs by law have to afford students the ability to complete the program in 18 weeks. So if you sign up with the program, you have to be able to get in and get the entire program done in 18 weeks. We don't recommend that. We say, hey, let's stretch the driver education program out. We give our students up to 2 years, but if you want to get it done in 18 weeks, you should be able to get it done in 18 weeks. But the best way to do it is to contact the Driver Instructional Services Division at the MVA in Glen Burnie. The gentleman who runs that, his name is Bill Kraft, very nice guy, on top of things, and he'll be able to give you the lowdown on a school with regard to infractions and what the requirements are. But essentially, check him out. Hey, I want to see your certificates of insurance. I want to see, what are your safety inspections on your vehicles? Vehicles have to be inspected every 12 months. They can only be so many years old. Like, for example, all of our vehicles, we only keep our vehicles for 36 months. And then we only keep them up to 45,000 miles, and we flip them out to our leasing company. So we keep new vehicles in our fleet at all times. So again, you have to be able to find out this information. It's readily available. But again, the best way to find out all the information, say, hey, what type of infractions, because this is public information, has this company had with regard to their audits? And when you call the organization up, hey, it's like, can I get my driver's training done in 18 weeks by law if I want to? And hey, what's the backup time for your behind the wheel instruction? And then I'd like to see certificates of insurance and the certification. The other thing is your driver education instructor is required to have their badge displayed. So it's a license, just like a driver's license, but it says driver instructor, and you're certified through the state. And that has to be renewed every 2 years. And you have to go through a background investigation every 2 years under the state system. So you have to make sure that the school is compliant with all the regulatory requirements under the state of Maryland for the Driver Instruction Services Division.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions that you want to put in the chat or anything like that? That was really fascinating, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Tom.
Sure.
And, good luck everybody out there with our kids on the road.
Yeah.
With everybody else.
Yeah. And if you have questions, if there's something you think of, or you just want to do, just send us an email at info@DriveSmart off our website at drivesmart.com. We answer questions all the time. And we have a fax page, but we answer questions all the time. Our girls in the office take care of you. So again, Lyric, thanks so much for the opportunity, and everybody have a great rest of your week. And thank you for the opportunity to share this information.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.